Hello internet friends, and welcome to this edition of Painting with Sonia. That's me, your creativity guide. And today I will be showing you step by step how to create a sunset landscape in acrylic paint on canvas. So the first thing you'll want is a blank canvas that's pre-primed. The size I'm using today is 20 by 16 inch. You'll also want water, lots of water for the techniques that we'll be using today. I have two separate containers. I have a larger container for my rinse water, which I'll be using to rinse my brushes clean, and then I have a smaller portion which I will be using as my mix water when I need water in my paint. And then I also have just a spray bottle just full of plain water. I also have a shop towel for drying my brush between rinses. I have paper towels and a rag. And this is just for cleaning up messes. The other thing I need to mention before we get into the paint is that it's acrylic. So you'll want to either wear like an apron or clothes that you don't mind getting painted on, because just like house paint, it will stain your clothes. As you can see here, this rag is quite stained. So the colors we'll be using today, I have titanium white, I have a cadmium yellow, this is the medium hue, and I'm just going to smear a little bit of each color as you can see. And this is Alizarin Crimson as my red. I have Dioxazine Purple, an Ultramarine Blue, and my dark brown, very dark brown, is Burnt Umber. These are artist colors. You don't have to use them, but they are nicer. If you can find equivalent shades in the craft paint versions, that'll work just as well. And at this stage, I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm just going to take my spray bottle and very gently mist my paint so that it doesn't dry out between steps and so on. I'll also have a list of all these materials in the description so you don't have to sit here writing them down. Oh yes, our brushes. How do you get the paint on the canvas? Well, I'm not opposed to finger painting. Painting is actually quite fun, but this tutorial is hopefully to help you, to encourage you to learn brush technique. So I have today a 1-inch flat brush. And the 1 inch just speaks to the width. The length of the bristles doesn't matter too much. And I'm using 3 different sizes of round brushes today, and by round it just speaks to the shape of the ferrule, the piece of metal that holds all the bristles together. And I have 3 different sizes. I'll probably just say large, medium, and small for today, but if you want the actual sizes, my large is 24. My medium is 16 and my small is 8. The other tool that you'll want, or material rather, is paper plates, and you'll want the wax coated with the shiny coating on them. I use one to keep my paint on, and then I use others for mixing surfaces. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do actually is I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm going to mist the top half of my canvas just very, very lightly. And then I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and I'm just going to spread the water over my canvas very gently. And all this is doing is it's sort of priming the canvas to receive the paint, and it'll help it flow better. Maybe we'll go a little further down. And I'm not sure if you can see how wet this is. Yes, you can. Okay, if I do that. So it's wet from here to here, and then here is pretty much dry. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to start, first I'm going to, if you live in a dry climate, you'll be doing that lots. So I'm going to start with some water, And the water helps just to sort of prime the brush also, to loosen the bristles and make it nice and supple. So I'm going to add some water to my mixing surface, and also it helps me get a feel for how the brush is going to work for me. So the first color I'm going to start with is our yellow, and I don't want very much. Just want, and you can see how the color changes. Like just the pure color is it's kind of heavy, and then once you spread it out with some water, you thin it out a little bit, you can see it becomes translucent and it lets more light in, so it becomes a lighter color. And I just splash some paint on my canvas, but that's okay, it's not a big deal because we're gonna put paint on it anyway. Okay, so the other thing about working your paint on your mixing surface first is that's exactly what you get to do. You get to experiment with it and play with it, see how the brush takes it before you actually commit anything to the canvas. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my yellow and we're gonna start with a basic wash from about just slightly lower than the middle, and I'm just gonna start from there in a horizontal line. And then I'm going to gradually work my way up. And as you can see, I'm keeping my paint nice and thin. And I'm not going to go up that far. Just about there. Okay, so that's my nice yellow. So this is the part where the sun, if the sun has just gone below the horizon line, you still see this sort of pale goldish yellow color. I'm going to rinse my brush clean. Try not to slosh water everywhere. And then I'm going to use my shop towel, just dry it off. Not completely, I just don't want any excess water sitting in my brush. Oh, pro tip, very important, you never want to leave a brush sitting in water if you want your brushes to last. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let that dry for a minute. I want my wash mostly dry, and you can there are a few things you can do to get it to dry faster. This is one of them. You could also use a hair dryer, which I don't have, or I would show you. That you just have to be real careful that you don't push any paint around if you have a lot of watery paint sitting on the canvas. The other thing you can do if you live in a hot, dry climate like I do, you can just stick your canvas outside for a couple minutes, and that should dry it off really well. And I think that's actually what I might do. So our next step, and I'm actually going to switch paper plates. So I just like to keep like a stack and hold them in my hand while I'm working, and I'll set this one aside. And I'm going back to the flat brush again, and this time I'm going to use, let's see, so now that my water is yellow, I'm going to switch to my more clear. And you can see there's still a little yellow in this brush, but I'm not too concerned about it because we're moving to a darker color, which will be blue, and we're going to be using way more paint, way more blue paint, so it won't be influenced by that yellow much at all. Okay, so I'm taking my blue, and then I'm going to start from the very top of my canvas, and with this step I'm going with mostly coverage. But you can see that my paint is still transparent. That means you can still see the white of the canvas beneath it. And I don't mean like this part where there's actually white. I just mean this like sort of translucent color. Like it's not just the pure, just for demonstration's sake, it's not that, which I don't necessarily want. So I'm just gonna work that into my painting. Okay, so I'm going to get a little more water now that I'm heading into my yellow, because I want my blue to thin out even more, and I want it to gently just lay over that yellow. Now if it's not completely dry, you'll get some physical blending, which that's okay too. So I'm actually going to rinse my brush clean now because I don't want to add any more paint. All I want to do is pull what's already on there down a little further. Oops. Okay, now we don't want so much water that it takes the paint out, or we don't want to wash it clean, but just want to bring that a little bit down. Okay, so I'm doing one fluid brush stroke, and that is going to give us a more gentle gradation, color gradation. See this white, this lighter band here. It's probably not that big a deal because we'll have clouds in the sky. Let's fix it. If that happens to you. Sometimes it happens. It's because I added too much water there. So I'm just gonna start from my blue a little bit. I'm not adding any paint. I'm just working with what's there. And you'll notice this green shade that's coming, that we're getting, which is fine. That actually happens. Okay, yeah, that's better. Now, this transition is troublesome because I want it to be smooth. So I'm just taking my damp brush and I'm just going to smooth it out. So at this stage, I do want my yellow in here to be completely dry before I do the next step. Okay, so I let that sit to dry for about 5 minutes, just air dry. And you can see there's still wet spots like up in here. But that's okay. My main concern is this part, and you can see it's totally dry. I'm gonna take my same blue mixing surface because we're going to transition the color. Okay, and I'm also gonna switch to my large round brush, and I'm going to do what if you haven't used your brush yet, you'll want to just wet it down and just get a feel for how it's gonna handle. And sort of move some of this paint around. You can tell some of it's dried. It's okay. Not a big deal. So I'm going to get a little bit more blue. And then I'm going to add some of my lovely purple color. Now, this color that we're mixing up here is for the purpose of the furthest horizon line. So I'm going to mix up a nice sort of blue-violet color. And I want it more blue than violet at this point. But I still like the warmth of the violet. And here's a little color theory lesson for you. We are putting this violet tinted tone right up against our lovely yellow here. And on the color wheel, if you remember or know, they're complementary colors. Yellow and violet are complementary. That means they're basically opposites. So in color theory, it's the idea that when you place colors next to each other, how they influence each other. The other part of color theory is layering or glazing. This is part of the technique that I guess I'll mention. So in this technique, our paint is translucent, and what that means is it's allowing the light of the canvas, the white of the canvas, to still illuminate it from underneath. So you're actually seeing light come through the paint as opposed to adding white to make things lighter, if that makes sense. So the way it was explained to me was, if you can imagine these layers of stained glass in different colors, and then they just lay on top of each other, and you're seeing through the layers instead of just looking at, say, just a flat mixture of paint. So I'm going to take my violet color now. For this technique, this is a fun one. I love this technique. I'm going to load up my brush, and what that means is just get as much paint on it as I can. But, so another pro tip is you always want to avoid getting your paint past this part of the brush. You never want to like get it over the ferrule, the metal part. If you can keep your paint on that section of the brush, that's like the sweet spot. For this technique anyways. You can be Van Gogh and paint with a palette knife, that works too. But for this technique, this is how we want it. So my brush is loaded, and what I'm going to do is, as I draw it across my canvas to get my horizon line in, I'm actually going to roll it along, and you'll see. So what it does is, I'll just show you. So I'm going to start here, and then, so as I draw it across, and now I'm going to just sort of invent my mountain shapes. I'm rolling the brush, and you can see what's happening here is it actually deposits more paint on that edge. Okay, so that's my horizon line. I'm going to fix it here. Now it's okay that you see these lighter spots, so we're not trying to hide what's behind it. I just want a nice crisp line at the top. And then what I'm going to do is, I didn't mix enough paint that time. So I'm going to try and replicate that same color. Doesn't have to be exact, but similar enough. And then for this stage, I'm just going to bring that same color down a little further, keeping it not too thick. Or opaque is the term. It means there's no light coming through. It's just thick paint. Think Van Gogh paint. But we're still, that's not what we want. The only place I really want that is on the edge, and you can see there's still areas, like the one I just did there, where the light is still coming through. That's okay. That's fine. Okay, so there's that. And you can see I'm not using much water at all, and that's because I want to keep the paint thick. But you can see it's still not, it's not opaque 100%. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little more water to my mixing surface, and then we're gonna take more purple. So we're going to do a secondary horizontal plane in my more purple color. And more color theory, the warmer the color is, the theory is that the closer it appears in space to us. So I'm basically going to do the same thing, and I don't know if that's even, oh yeah, it is warmer enough, warm enough. Okay, so I'm basically going to do the same thing down lower, doing my rolling the brush technique. And I like what I see so far. I think, okay, so I'm going to do this one more time. And this time I'm going to use what I already have here, and I'm going to add some of my red. So this is going to warm it up even more. So now our another horizontal plane, and I feel like, yeah, okay, so that's a nice sort of maroon color. So as long as I keep it, so as long as it keeps getting warmer and warmer, the closer we get. And this plane, I'm not gonna do too many like dramatic not many like rolling hills. So what I imagine is the furthest is our mountain's majesty. The middle one is kind of the rolling hills as you get further away from the mountains. And then this this third one is like sort of the valley spreading out between us and those mountains in the distance. Okay, and this one I'm going to add a little more water, and I'm going to bring that color down. And I'm not too worried about the brush strokes. And yeah, I'm actually going to bring this color all the way down to the bottom, because mostly just for coverage, because we'll cover that purple, but I don't want any white showing in my foreground. So now I am actually going to let the whole thing dry. We're back and it's completely dry. Yes, everything's completely dry. Don't move on with the next step until your sky is completely dry. For our next step, we want a fresh mixing surface, or I can reuse my yellow. There's still some wet stuff, but I'll just keep it a point to stay away, and you might actually be able to see what I'm doing better. Okay, so I'm going to use my medium round brush now, size 16, and we are going to begin working in white. I could have just gone from my paint, just my thick paint, straight to the canvas, but once again, I like being able to play with it and get a feel for it first. In this step, what we're going to be doing is blocking in our cloud shapes in the sky. Let's just dive in here and imagine cloud shapes. If you wanted to find a photo to copy, like on the internet or something, or maybe you've taken your own photos, or maybe there's clouds in your sky right now, you go outside and just take a look at them for inspiration. You could do that, or you could just make it up as you go along. Just pull it from memory. I'm just blocking in my white, and for this technique I'm just sort of dabbing the paint onto the canvas. So in the technique, the glazing technique, which is the layering technique that I talked about before, you always want to begin with this pure, or not pure, but a white surface underneath. Another way we could have done this is it takes more time, and it's a little more, you have to be a little more technical with it, but I would have sketched the clouds in and then done my sky background around them. If you're a total purist and you need the white canvas underneath, that's what you do. You leave your white on the canvas, and you wouldn't even paint with white paint, which is actually how I learned to paint initially, but this is a little shortcut. It's yeah, and it's fine. I've given myself permission to be okay with it now, but my first teacher would be appalled. He'd be like, no, you have to keep the white. The only white you get to paint with is your canvas. And it was great. I mean, the results are very beautiful. I believe Maxfield Parrish, if you're familiar with the artist, he never physically mixed any colors together. It was all just this glazing technique. So I'm trying to determine whether I want more clouds higher up in the sky, and I think I do. Oh, another trick, or not a trick, a principle, I guess, of composition is don't be afraid, or don't feel like you have to constrain all the objects into the edges. Think of your canvas as more of a window rather than a box that you put things into. So if you're looking out your window, of course the clouds go beyond the window. That just keeps it looking more more natural, more organic. And imagine what you see beyond the edges of the canvas, because that's actually part of the painting, is that aspect of, or that idea that you can imagine other things happening besides what you've managed to capture in your painting. And I think that's a sign of a good composition, is being able to capture that idea that it's not just what's on the canvas that's important. It's when you can inspire people to imagine other things happening outside of it. This little cloud from here to here is going to be sitting in front of this one, and this one I want to actually emphasize so that it doesn't look like I just have like individual little clouds neatly placed, because that's not really how it happens in nature. And that can be aesthetically pleasing if it's well done. But for this piece, we want it more natural and organic looking. Okay, so I just have to remember in my mind that this, or let's see, this top cloud is going to be the one on top, and this one will fall behind it. I might switch it while I'm painting it because I forgot, but either way, it's going to be fine. Okay, and just being a little extra fussy with the edges of this cloud. So in life, you would see it better. It would be in focus more, so you could see more detail. Okay, so once you're comfortable with your clouds, wait, here I go fussing again. I don't know why I'm doing that. But anyway, once you're comfortable with your cloud, the other thing that helps determine how your composition or how your design is looking is to step back. Obviously that helps a lot, but the other thing you can do is look at it in front of a mirror. I did the mirror trick, and I am actually quite pleased with how it is. It feels natural and organic to me. While our clouds dry, we're going to be working in the foreground. And I'm going to take my previous palette with the blue and purple, and it's mostly dry. We'll go back to the larger round brush for this step. Okay, so I'm going to start with water. I don't think any of this is coming up, and if it is, it's okay. I'm going to begin with brown, my dark umber, or sorry, burnt umber. You can also use raw umber. And then I'm going to add a little purple, maybe a lot of purple, and then a hint of red. And that's just going to warm it up and pull it forward. And I'm just going to lay this in probably right here, because I don't want too much light in that middle area. In this area, the details are going to be very vague. So my last layer is going to be in, I'm just going to keep adding, I'm going to add some more brown, and then black, blue. And that's going to give us a color as dark as black. Not quite black, but it's dark enough that it will read as black. I have an aversion to using black because black, so if we think of white as the absence of color, black is the absence of light. And so it's almost like the antithesis of this whole painting style. So I very rarely, if ever, use black in my painting. Okay, and this is the foreground. So this is the closest thing to us, this layer here. So I'm going to take some blue again and some brown again and just sort of mash it together, not really mixing. And then I'm just going to very, like I said, nondescriptly just put in little things. And I don't even know how well you can see that, but there is pretty much no light happening or coming through in our foreground, which is how we want it. I might add a little more blue, just so that it doesn't look completely like a flat brown, muddy brown. This is where you just lay down the color, and then with the idea that your eye is going to see it and your mind is going to make things up. So that's good. I'm rinsing my brush completely, and I'm actually going to have to change that water, because after a while your brushes are only as clean as your rinse water, so that's not very clean. Now, at this point now, I'm just waiting for my cloud shapes to dry, and some of them are pretty much dry. You can hear that it's a little tacky. This means it's still slightly wet, but I think, oh, that's a little wet. I think it's okay. It's enough. It's dry enough to do what we're going to do next. So now we're switching in our minds to a different technique, and this is probably closer to what most people imagine, like traditional technique, where you paint with thick paint, but we still get to use transparency. So it's where we'll be jumping back and forth, and we're going to be using our smallest brush finally, our size 8 round, and I'm going to be reusing my yellow and white mixing surface, and I'm going to start with more yellow. Oh, sorry, pro tip, you never want to mix with a fine brush. You want to save your fine brush for the actual work. So you want to mix with a slightly larger brush, just so it doesn't get clogged. It's weird to think of it that way, but you can actually clog a brush up. And that just happens when there's too much paint on it and you can't control it. I might actually do this. Well, let's see, where are we? Okay, so I'm going to start with these clouds. The middle cloud. So these ones are the furthest away. This one is kind of behind that one, and then this one is like, this is the middle. So we'll start with the middle. And so with this cloud, I might actually be able to get it right away with this brush. Yeah. Okay, so this is my medium size 16 round, and just my yellow paint. It's kind of thick, kind of little, there's not much water, but it's not like just straight from the tube. So what I'm going to do now, the step is, you can put your finger down to steady yourself if you need to. And then it's more of a writing, like we're writing or drawing with our paintbrush. But so the idea is I'm just going to start adding color, this yellow color, and I want to keep my that white bottom edge on these clouds anyway. And I'm just adding the color so you can see it's transparent or translucent. It's letting some light in. And I'm losing the cloud there, that's okay. I'm not too concerned with the shape of this color or my brush stroke. I'm not being very careful at all, and it's fine because we're just shading the cloud. As long as my line sort of matches the lower half. Yeah. It almost disappeared, but we'll bring it back. Okay, so then I'm going to do that to the next one. Now, which one did I say was in front? I think I said the top one. Either way, I'm going with the top one right now. So the top one is the one in front. So I'm going to just sort of invent this edge right here. Just continue it on. And then I'm just gonna have to remember to leave that white edge in there. Okay. And then I'm going to carry that color up just a little bit to the middle. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing to my bottom cloud, or the one behind it that's just slightly behind it, not too far off. Okay. So like that. And then, yeah, like I said, I just have to remember to leave this white edge for the cloud that's in front of it. Let's see, these ones, oh, this is pretty dry. Yeah, that's very nice. Okay, so for those ones, I'm gonna still mix with my medium brush, and I'm going to add just a little bit of my Alizarin Crimson so that I get a nice orange happening. Okay, and then I'm just going to go basically do the same thing we just did, but I am going to go ahead and cover my white edges, the white edges of the cloud. Or I'm going all the way down to the edges. Okay, and you can see my paint is kind of watery, so I have areas where this is more like a watercolor technique, so you can see it's gathering in places. Now I can either leave it like that and work with it, which is kind of fun, but if we're trying to save time and we want to just, you know, get a piece done for the lesson, I will want my paint a little thicker, and then you have a little bit more control. There, so less pooling, like a pool of water, or less puddling of the paint or the water in the paint in the water, the pigment in the water. All these crazy terms. And then this one, I'm going to be I just want to emphasize that edge, sort of, not too crazy, but okay. So those are the furthest clouds, and you'll see what we do with those later on. So let's go in with more yellow, more red. That's a little much. Or actually, okay, so we're gonna go with another pass of orange, but this time the orange is gonna be a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm going to basically do the same thing, only not the same thing, I'm just going to continue we're doing a color gradation now. And what that means is a transition from one color to another. Okay, so I'm just laying that darker just slightly over, so you can see my little edge is kind of disappearing into the background. That's okay. It doesn't have to be that stark, but I'm just adding this darker shade over over the top, and I'm not too concerned with the blending because it's so light, it kind of happens on its own. Okay, and then for the final step is I'm adding more red. So now we have this sort of fiery orange color, and that's going to be my top, the top of my clouds. And okay, I should have switched to my finer brush because this is getting to be a little much, but we'll see. Okay, so I have my fine brush, and it's dampened, so it's ready to use. And my paint is already mixed up, so all I'm going to do is draw it up into the brush. And you can see it's loaded nicely. And now I can do the top edges of this cloud. And I'm being a little more careful, a little more controlled and deliberate. Trying to stay over the white where we blocked in. And it's a little timid. I want it to be a little bit bolder, so I'm just gonna finish this one and then I'll go back over the other one. Now while I'm laying in the dark color, these clouds are becoming more defined. So if in this step I want to fix something or correct the shape of something, I can do that. Like this little thing is kind of, yeah, that's fine. Maybe this is kind of more of a, just feathering that out. And this is more of a dry brush technique. I have very little water and only some paint. I mean, I'm not going for a blocky shape. I'm just kind of feathering it out. I don't know how to describe or how to say that better. Okay, and a little more orange, a little more water, and I am gonna, so here's kind of a no-no, but not really, because I'm not mixing that much paint. Just enough to sort of put that fire back. So I'm not, yeah, you can mix a small amount with your detail brush, but you never want to mix like a large quantity with a small brush. Okay, and so you can see I'm just coming in with this darker orange and defining and refining that top edge while maintaining my gradation. So I don't have any hard, how can I explain it? There's no hard transition. Maybe this area is a little much. That's another technique. You can always paint with your fingers. It's a good one when if you just need to take paint out really quick. So there's our background clouds. Okay, so we'll switch back to our medium brush because we'll finish the middle, because this is mostly dry. Even if it wasn't dry, that would be fine. But we're switching to our medium brush. I'm going to start with yellow. When mixing colors, you always want to start with the lighter color first. So yellow, adding some of my red. So the next color we're going for is the orange. So it would be like the shade we did down in the bottom. So I'm going to need more yellow. More yellow. And then So yeah, by itself that's pretty dark, but once I put it on there in a transparent way, you can see it's a little different. So let's just do it to it. We're basically doing the same thing we did for the yellow. I'm just going to keep staying between the white on the top and the yellow underneath, and now, right now I'm just laying the color down, and then we'll blend it in a second. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse my brush clean now that my paint is on there. I don't want too much water. We'll see. I might want water. This is where you have to listen to the material or the medium and see what it wants. And actually I feel like maybe the smaller brush might be better for this, so it's still kind of damp. So let's see. So really what I'm just gonna do is take the paint that's already there and just with my sort of damp brush, I'm just going to blend it along that edge. And if you find that your paint is too dry to do this, not to worry, because I will show you on the next cloud how we do with the more traditional blending with paint. Oops. I just rinsed in my mix water. So now we're going to go back to our medium brush to do the mixing. And I could use what I have here. I don't know if it's enough. Let's try it. Oh yeah, maybe. Yes. Okay, so I'm keeping the paint thick now. So I'm going in with my darker orange, more in the middle, leaving my yellow where it's at. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to my smaller brush because that just makes more sense. So now I'm going to take some yellow to lighten my orange. And here again, trying to keep the paint in the sweet spot on the brush so you don't clog it up. Okay, I might need to just start with yellow actually. So yeah, I was just going to start with just yellow. And then I'm going to, basically I'm physically mixing the paint on the canvas as I go along. So you can see I lost my yellow edge there, which I'm not too worried about because I can just bring it back in. I could add white, and that's going to bring back my light yellow. You can see that there. And actually, I lost my white edge altogether, so I'm just gonna put it back in there. Like so. Okay, so with transparent paint, you're always trying to leave some light shining through. With the opaque painting technique, you're adding and subtracting light in a different way. So I have my in-between shade mixed up. Ooh, do I? So there's some... Oh, geez. Okay. So let's begin again with the yellow. And a little bit of red. Just, okay, that was too much, but that's okay. Rinse my brush. Okay, so now we're just taking the yellow and some red. And so the idea is you just adjust the color on your palette. Some people will actually pre-mix portions of the in-between shades and then blend it. Really, it all just depends on what you like to do. I prefer not to do it that way. just because I feel like when you mix paint, especially, okay, when you mix white with anything, it actually, in my opinion, it dulls it a little bit. Which literally it does. The pigment, the white pigment, will actually cover the color pigment in the other paint and dull it out a little bit. That only happens with white, so when you mix, like when we're mixing our orange and our yellow, it's not as much of a concern, but okay, so we're going back to our orange for our upper edge here. Oops. So more yellow. And this is where it gets to be, you'll find yourself just grabbing paint from your palette, and then, because you're mixing it, instead of mixing it on your mixing surface, you're mixing it on your canvas. Which there's nothing wrong with that, it's just a totally different technique. And you will get a feel for what you like to do. Okay, so we have more yellow. Oops. So what I'm trying to do is just make this transition between this yellow edge and my orange, just to be a smooth, not perfectly smooth, but just a natural, make it look like a natural transition. Oops. Okay, that's a little harsh. That's okay. Okay. Okay, so now, while I'm here, I'll just continue with my little rainbow. Basically, that's all color gradations are, little rainbows, or sections of rainbow. So I'm taking my red paint, having some yellow on standby, and I'm just getting a darker orange in here, and then you'll see the very top edge will have more red in it. Okay, I'm running out of paint. Not using much water at this point, you can see that. With this technique, you kind of are jumping back and forth. It's like, it feels like you're constantly adjusting things, and maybe that's why I don't like it, because the other way to me feels more, I don't know, because this way is pretty deliberate too, so it's just more about preference and what you're more comfortable with. Okay, so I'm taking my darkest red, and it's okay if it's really red. I'm being very careful about my edge. And you can see there's still quite a bit of light showing through. This isn't 100% opaque paint. So this is where I'm going to want to do some blending. And I'll take my yellow. And actually, I'm just going to take the yellow straight on there, and then it's going to blend it itself. There, see? So I'm literally mixing the paint on the canvas and then leaving it. I'm just in the pure red now, but still, it's still very transparent or translucent. You can still see through it. It's not like that. I'd have to mix other colors to adjust it to the shade that I want it. Actually, that's quite nice, but I would never just, I mean, unless I was going, like, for what we did in here, that's where I would use that really thick paint. Okay, so now going back to the yellow. And that took too much of the red out, so I'm going to put some of that back in there. And as I keep saying, it's like this constant back and forth with the colors. So now we're going to move on to the next cloud. And for this one, because it's a little bit bigger, I'm going to use the medium round brush. Okay, so we start with the yellow, the lighter color. And then I'm gonna add some red. My Alizarin Crimson. Okay, and I want it to be a little more orange. Okay, so this is the transparent technique, more water. And so it's very similar. So we're basically gonna do the same thing we did. Okay, and I think I'm actually going to switch to my smaller brush because I like, oops, that was my cheat sheet. It just has my notes. Okay, so I like the way the smaller brush gives me these little tiny brush strokes that add to helps it look like a puffy cloud. Okay, so now with this technique, instead of adding more paint, I'm actually taking some away, as you could see there, I think. I hope. So I'm gonna get more water, and now I'm moving into the darker orange color. And you can see it's not really that much darker. So we'll add a little more red. And there we go. Okay. Actually, so what I'm going to do is, I need more red. Fresh red. I'm going to start with the pure red with a little water. And we'll go ahead and finish that edge. And I think I want it to be even more dramatic, so I'm going to add more paint. There we go. That's the fire we want. Okay, now I'm going to rinse my brush and dry it out as much as possible, because for this blending it's going to be like a dry brush blending. So I'm just taking my brush, and it's still damp. There's no way to like completely squeeze all the water out, but as much as possible for this technique. And then I'm just gonna basically move whatever paint is still wet on there. And when I talk about feathering, this is what I mean, or just I think of like a feather duster, like using a feather duster to move the pigment around. I like that, but I think I want my red to be even more pronounced on the top edge. And it's okay that I didn't do the whole like white and orange thing in here. If I want to add it later, I can. Okay, so we're gonna do the orange on our other little cloud. So all my stuff is dry here. So I'm gonna move to the white area, and once again start with yellow. And now you can see I'm mixing with my small brush, but I'm not using a lot of paint. I don't need that much, so I'm not concerned about clogging it up. I have a nice orange. It might be a little dark. Yeah. Let's go back with the yellow. Okay, that's better. So we're going to add that orange. Okay, so now I'm just going to stick with my water and dry brush technique. Okay, so let's move on to the red tone. So I'm just gonna sort of mop up the orange that I have and then add a little red to it. And it's okay if it's darker. Let's see, I keep forgetting to to show you my palette in the shot so you can see what's going on. Okay. Okay, and here's the tricky part. I have to remember that I want my white edge for that other cloud that's in front. So I'm being very careful, very deliberate, and I'm trying to follow as though it's following that yellow, part. Okay, and then this is the white of this cloud, so I can cover that up. And there. Oops. Wah! Okay. So I'm actually going to take that bit out and so you can wet it, and then I'm going to take my paper towel and actually wipe it off. That's fine. Okay. I'm going to keep adding red to the top of this cloud. And actually, I'm going to go very bold and dark with this, so that way, just to really emphasize that this cloud is behind that other one. And you can see it's starting to really helps this one come forward. Okay, so now we kind of lost our orange, so I'm going to bring it back. And this is where you can gauge, you know, what you're feeling like. So I'm switching techniques now. I'm going in with some thick paint and then see how it goes. So sometimes you'll figure it out with practice. Sometimes you'll feel like one technique will give you more control in a certain situation. It's just learning how to determine which situation that is, or which situation call for which technique. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back my yellow because I kind of lost it. Or the in-between orange is the one that's really going away. Paint is forgiving. Oops. And I just rinsed in my mixed water. Naughty, naughty. Okay. Well, I can take care of that in a minute. Okay, so we're bringing back the yellow. Kind of. Sort of. But still keeping that orange alive. Okay. And these little dark areas, I'm not too concerned. Okay, what I am concerned with is this edge that I'm gonna keep fussing over probably. So I'm just gonna add more red. I want it to be dark. I want it to be a stark contrast because I really want that the cloud in front of it to literally shine through. And now I'm going to do a little color theory trick slash technique. I'm going to, so yes, we still want these fiery reds, but I want to tone the color, or I'm going to adjust the temperature of this color. And I'm going to do that with a little purple. Just a little bit, not a lot at all. Okay. And a little yellow. And so what happens when you mix complementary colors or opposites on the color wheel is you end up with a version of gray. And that's what I'm going to very gently, you know what, I think I might let that dry first, because I'm afraid that if I start going over it, it'll bring up the stuff. Which is fine. So I'm actually going to use this gray since we have it. And all I'm going to do is very gently just put it in here. Just a subtle glaze over this background cloud. And just over the parts of it that I want to sink back. So I don't know if you can, let's see. Yeah. So it should look like it's now sitting behind this cloud. And if I want to strengthen it a little bit more, it's hard to do when you're, especially with purples or darker colors, it's hard to do that influencing without changing the value of this cloud. I don't want it to look darker. I just want it to look further away. So it will look darker. That's a given. But I just want it. Okay. And this one, here, what we'll do is warm it up slightly by using a simple glaze of just yellow. And I can even go a little bolder with it. I love this cadmium yellow because its transparent version is just amazing, and it sits on top like it's almost imperceptible, but your eye knows what's going on, and it tells your brain to see what it needs to see. Okay, so while we let that dry, we're still waiting for this part. Yeah, that still needs to dry. Okay, so we can move on now. Yeah, let's... well, I guess we could refine this a little bit more. I just want... Okay, so I rinsed my brush clean. I'm back on the red kick, and I'm just using more thick, just thick paint. That's a little better. Yeah, nice and bold. Okay, so now, while we wait for those to dry, let us begin on our large clouds. Okay, so I'm gonna go back.